Okay, so welcome everybody. The purpose of this meeting is really for us to go over um, some of the expectations for the course, and we're going to focus on your expectations for writing for this course. So we have been blessed with the opportunity to use a writing coach for this course, and this is Dan Roberts, who's joining us here. And so Dan's going to go over kind of the purpose of his coaching and kind of the expectations for you to be turning in sections to myself and also Dan. So what I will do is pull up let me share my screen here. Main screen. Share. And then go into the attachment for today. There was the link to the writing coach here. And I also put this in an announcement in Canvas. So some information about the writing coach, my information and Dan's information, the objectives for today to review the purpose of the writing coach, expectations for using the writing coach, and how to access the writing coach services. So really, one of the objectives of our whole MSN program is that you are able to communicate orally and in writing. And we have seen that inadvertent medical errors can be the leading cause of deaths in hospitals. And some of this is attributable to poor written and oral communication. So we really want to focus on you graduating from APU with the skills you need to communicate. So we're devoting some resources for you to utilize a writing coach. So we know that you might have gotten to this final class with variations and expectations of how your professors communicated with you about writing. And so we just want to make sure everybody's on the same page for this writing intensive course that you have here. So we're going to be asking you to meet with a writing coach on 3 different times, and this isn't an option. The first time will be after the background and significant section of your paper, which is the week that's due week 3. The second one is at the end of your completed review of the literature, and that's at the end of week 6. I know that says something different, but hang with me. And then the final draft, the end of week 12. So what we're going to be doing is have you first upload your drafts in Canvas. To make sure I don't say Sakai. Upload them there. You'll see if you're in the course. Let's see if I can get to this here. And we go to assignments. So if you're in our Canvas course, in assignments here, you can see there's these section drafts. So that's when each section is due to myself. What I've done today is I've gone into this week 3, week 6, and week 12, and also added, let's just show that there, that it goes to me on Canvas, and once I get this draft from you, I'm going to make some comments and notations on the side. So important that you do submit it in Microsoft Word. So I'll take a look at it. I'll review it for content and also grammar and APA format. And I really want to focus on the content and then make some notations about grammar and APA format on this draft. I'm going to get it back to you, and my goal is really to have it back to you within 2 to 3 days. Once I get this back to you, you'll need to go ahead and sign up to meet with Dan, and you guys can take a look at this paper and focus. He can guide you on how to improve this grammar in APA format. So I'm going to have him dive into that or unpack it a little bit more, but I just wanted to show you where in Canvas you can see that it's marked here when you need to have your writing coach to review it. So by the time I get this back to you, it's due at the end of week 3. I'll get it back to you mid-week 4, and that means that if you can get it to Dan by the end of week 4, that would be great. And that's why kind of in this writing coach here, it said you should see him by the end of week 4. So still due to me week 3. I'll try to get it back to you mid-week 4, and then you try to make an appointment for Dan in week 4. Now, that meeting might happen right in week 4. It might happen in week 5, but really the goals are to point out some of these repeating errors or repeating misconceptions about APA format so that you can apply this to your whole paper. So it's okay that it's, you might have already gone on and did a little bit of revisions. He'll still have time to point out some of these common errors and guide you through improving those. So that's kind of written right here. I would get it back to you within 5 days, but I'm really going to try 3 days. And then there's some more information in here about how to contact Dan, but again, I'll let him go into that. And then here's a course calendar, which I really like looking at this a little bit better than looking at Canvas and having a hyperlink onto everything. So you can see here you have, this is the same exact course calendar that's in your in Canvas, except for I've just added these little yellow parts here. So at 3 different time points, you will meet with the writing coach, and this is to facilitate your writing. I also want to point out in these modules here, here are some library and writing resources that are additional for you. Let's see if this will cooperate with me. Library and writing resources. I hope it goes to that. So you can see here, there's different writing resources. An APA paper template is there. Information about literature reviews. So I just want to point that out, that one resource there. And then as far as resources specific to this course, we get into that in week 1 that just passed. So you saw in here in the readings. My computer's getting a little slow. The types of paper were there, selecting a topic, some exemplars, and then really this is the meat and bones, Hyla, of the whole paper here is this comprehensive paper rubric. So what I'm actually going to do is share with you another video presentation that I've done that goes over these specific points of the paper. But I think, as we kind of all transition into a new LMS from Sakai to Canvas, might be a little hard to find things. So if I refer to something in a video or am asking you, I already noticed there was one PowerPoint where it said Sakai in it, so I haven't gone through and made all those adjustments, but if you wouldn't mind just pointing out to me where there's any discrepancies, I can fix those for you. Do you guys have any overarching questions? I know week 1 we were just kind of doing discussions. Week 2, I'm going to have you really kind of land on your problem of interest or your topic, that will be what you'll write about in 597. I want you to make sure that you're clear about what type of paper that you're going to do. So this will all be what will be in the discussions for this week. So I will give you feedback. You know, this looks like a good problem. What type of paper you're going to want to do. So we should, between the back and forth there, we should, you guys should all land on a topic for this week. But I just want to halt right there and see if you have any questions. Okay. Well then, why don't I turn it over to Dan, and I will stop sharing my screen there, and I see Naveen's with us and Sarah. Great. Welcome, guys.
Professor?
Yes.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
So I was wondering, for the topic of interest, I'm not sure, I'm sure you read it actually, but I stated something about hepatitis B in the Asian population, and then I also stated something about the relationship of chronic and cancer between stress and, I guess, stress. So my question is the paper supposed to be like kind of about those kind of topics, or?
Yeah, those are perfect. It's really it's really kind of like an evidence-based practice change, and what you're doing is, so you're going to build a case for some kind of gap in healthcare, or some kind of pressing agenda of healthcare services. What's going on in healthcare today. And in week one, I kind of put up there some of those, some research agendas, some topics that have been at local conferences, recent conferences in nursing. And then what you'll do is you'll do a review of the literature that asks some questions about this topic. We'll find out what we know, what we don't know, and then you're going to take this information and maybe this gap and try to develop an intervention to fill this gap. So I know with SUP, she wanted to do something with pressure ulcer intervention. So maybe through her experience working as a nurse, she's noticed that there isn't enough attention really given to preventing pressure ulcers. So what can she do in her role as an advanced practice RN nurse educator to improve this problem? So what do we already know? What's already being done? And where is there a gap? How can her proposed intervention overcome this gap?
Okay, so the interventions won't actually be implemented real life.
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question. Anyone else? Go ahead, Sup.
Sorry, I was figuring out how to unmute myself. Okay. Will you be giving us the green light through the discussion as well?
Yes. And
so just prepare frequently for the approval of the topic, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yep. So you'll know, if you're on the right track. And, this is going to be a general topic. And as we learn more about it, you're going to whittle down to something, because you don't want to do something that we already know tons about, with carb counting and diabetes education or something like that. I mean, if you did that topic, you'd put in those terms into the databases, and you'd have 30 billion hits. So we want to make sure that you are doing something that's going to be more bite-sized and manageable than taking on a whole huge intervention to improve the health of a huge population. So it should be something manageable, something not too huge. And again, I'll be looking at your discussion post this week and get back to you about whether that's good or not, or appropriate or not too overwhelming for you.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question. I'm sorry that I came in late.
Oh, don't worry about it.
I was just wondering, I think you mentioned that we could do something that we've done in the past. So like if we're choosing our topic from the transitions course, or a topic that we've kind of been building on throughout our coursework, that would be okay as well.
Yeah, and that's exactly why in week one I kind of said, you know, collect what you already have and start that table of evidence where you're creating a repository of articles and work that you've already have. So, you know, why recreate the wheel? You guys have been working hard for 2 years. I highly encourage you to use, you know, information from other classes. You know, if you had done something in the healthcare policy class about, you know, billing for diabetes education or something, you know, you pull that in. So since I'm a diabetes educator, I always use that as an example of diabetes. But that's, you know, just one of those examples.
So I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Sarah.
Hi,
Okay.
Sarah.
Since I'm going to be working for a doctor when I become a nurse practitioner, I had mentioned like for urinary incontinence in women, and she wants me to publish it. So like do like a peer review and all that. So I know like the requirements, I was looking at the syllabus, it's a little different, but I feel like it's still pretty similar to everything else. Is that correct? Or
Yeah, well, you know, I think I had talked to Claire a little bit about that too, but you know, we have to see what's already been published. If somebody's already done a systematic review, you know, in the last 3 years, then it doesn't really make sense for you to redo it again at this point. So let's take a look at it and see what we know about this already. And you know,
Okay.
if it looks like there's a gap in knowledge, you know, then I think that would be great for you to do. We'd be doing an integrative review of the literature about, you know, were you saying treatment for urinary incontinence?
yeah, she's doing something kind of new as well for it. There's research out there, but it hasn't been brought to the United States. So
Okay. Well, just remember this course it's your course and you're the one that needs to put in all this work. So while her suggestions are great, yeah, if you're going to be working with her, you'll have time to apply everything you're learning now. So, you know, I'd say don't, you know, lose sight of the forest. You know, we really want to teach you, you know, how to incorporate everything that you learned while you were here. So, you know, we can look at what's already been done and see if that's appropriate. And we'll be glad to do that this week with you in the discussions. Or, you know, I do have my office hours Thursday, so please sign up for those. There's half-hour slots if you need more. You can take an hour, and you can also just email me and say, hey, those times don't work. When else can I meet with you?
okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I'm gonna.
If we did have a question and we wanted to meet with you, would you rather us do an email or make an appointment for Zoom, or come on to Zoom during the time frames that you're on?
Yeah, it's so much easier to talk with you in Zoom, and you know, I think those meetings are always more fruitful than just a email. So that works for me. You know, I do realize you guys might work during the day, and I'm 3 hours ahead. So if you want to do early morning meetings, you know, I'm up at 6 o'clock your time, probably 5 o'clock your time most mornings. So early mornings really work. And you know, so probably a Zoom meeting, but if it's just a small question, you can just send me an email too. Okay, well, thanks for the great questions. I think we'll turn it over to Dan.
Hello, everyone. My face will be going away here quickly because I'm going to be sharing my screen. I wanted to say just a few things. Actually, let me stop sharing my screen for the first part. I wanted to say a few different areas, so I apologize that it'll feel a little bit scattered, but hopefully it'll all make sense in the end. The first is just about the Writing Center in general, not the Writing Center in your course specifically. it's good for students to know that we work under a coaching model. So sometimes students think, for example, that we might be able to mark errors on a text. The Writing Center would look at that appointment like, okay, this student is working in the proofreading stage. How can we coach their proofreading? So it does require immediate communication. When you're meeting with us, you can't like send us the paper. We're a different model a little bit. Again, in this class, things are a little bit different, and there will be a way for you to send me the paper ahead of time, but we're just speaking about the Writing Center in general. So the more you have a sense for what you're trying to struggle with when you come to meet with us, the better. That's a good general thought for meeting with the Writing Center is, what exactly am I asking questions about or struggling with at this stage? And then we have a range of tools that we might use to help coach you through some of those, which you'll undoubtedly be seeing when you meet with me later on. The second area that I wanted to speak about a little bit was related to the library search process, just in case any of you had not seen a tool that I think will be very important to you in the next couple of weeks. Let me share my screen. Most of you have probably already seen it. It won't take long to show. But as part of the writing process, sometimes we spend a lot of time in research that we can focus a little bit more. So I chose heart attack just as a very common health term. One of the main things you'll be doing in your library search, you probably already know, is to add more keywords to sharpen your search. So that was the next step I wanted to show you. See how heart attack has 885,000 sources. Let's say I was focusing on emergency medical technicians and their role in heart attack. That might be a little too narrow, I don't know. But as we're playing around with our searches, most students stop at those words. And I want to encourage you to take a look. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but take a look down the left-hand side where the screen says refine by. Students don't often make as much use of these as they can, and I encourage you to really focus in as far as you can when you're searching for your sources and really eliminate secondary materials that are not as direct for your search. So for example, if you saw a publication placed in the United States, that's often a very useful restriction in medical research. The ones I like to point out the most, especially for medical things like nursing, are the publication date. You can limit when your article was published in your searches. And I encourage students to very strongly focus their results. See how this is down to 3 digits. I often try to get down to 2 digits if I can. I might search for different sections within my paper. One section might be on the role of the emergency medical technician. Another section might be on just describing the problem and the background on heart attack statistics. So I might have different searches going on, but in each search, I'm going to try and focus it as much as I can to get a very small set of numbers. That usually will help you to find better documents and spend less time in the searching and reading process. Does anybody have questions so far just about this library tool before I move to talk a little bit about APA materials? Okay. So I don't see all the faces. I assume from the silence, there's no questions yet. Good. We're going to take a look next at kind of APA, several different areas that are connected in the citation process. A good kind of overview for your APA formatting thoughts when you're dealing with your sources on the paper. Okay. So one of the main things I encourage students to do often when they're meeting with us is just to kind of recontextualize their feelings about the APA style. It's not being forced down our throats. Well, I mean, maybe sometimes it feels that way, but it doesn't come from something being forced as much as from an emerging standard. Like workplaces have formal and respectful clothing, and so 3-piece suits are kind of common. That's a part of the situation. It's not really being forced down our throats. Some offices you might not have the top, the three-piece suit full, might just be a shirt and tie, and still have no problems from your boss. But that's the thing we want to think about with APA. It's a style, and it's getting more common. It's not like they're pushing us to do things that are really radically strange, but in fact, for the kinds of texts that are published in that style, they're showing us some of the most common choices that work best. So as a part of all that, this workshop is going to start with the references. Any really citation process in APA is useful to start with the reference formats because, as you probably already know, the in-text citations are taken from the first two pieces of the reference, the author and the date. Sometimes when there's no author, that's a title and date, but those are still the first two parts of the reference entry. So we're going to start with the references to move into the citations, and you'll see some reference material examples along the way. So I'd like to give a general overview. I'm sorry, is that a question? I heard a microphone cutting in. Is that someone with a question? No. Okay. One of the things that is most specific to the APA citation style is that author date citation that I mentioned. This is kind of obvious most of the time to people, the way the citations happen. But what's not obvious is that it's replacing footnotes. The APA manual even says a little bit about footnotes, but the basic citation stuff that's happening is using author date citations instead of footnotes. So the combination of those two pieces from the reference, the author and the date, are actually like the footnote. They are creating the spot where a citation is happening in your text. So kind of being aware of that helps us to know that the combination of author and date creates the footnote, so to speak, creates the citation. A lot of the history of every style, not just the APA, goes back to research libraries when we only had print materials available. The APA, the last edition, came out in 2010. So you still see a lot of the print formats as the thoughts behind how things are structured. You'll see more of those as you see more examples in your classes. But it's a good thing for us to realize that, for example, a volume and issue number are very commonly needed on journals because of how journals were published historically. And we'll see a little bit more detail about journals here shortly. And as I mentioned on the last slide, this is really a move toward greater standardization. It's not a wild and crazy exercise or something. So I do recommend that everyone, as they're getting to know the APA requirements, I do recommend everyone have the APA manual. It's not really a student guide. It is an expert reference, but it's good to have on hand and kind of get familiar with it over time, especially by using the index. Know how that book is laid out. For example, if a student started with the index, they might realize that chapter 2 covers all the different sections of a research paper, a scientific paper in APA style. So there's a lot of interesting things you can learn from how they've laid out the book. I don't recommend studying the index, but looking at it from time to time when you're trying to find things might be a helpful idea. At the end of chapter 2, they have a scan of a sample paper, and the highlights, the marking flags on that can be another good way to learn more about APA requirements. The table of contents might be even less direct than the index. The index, if you don't know, is in the part in the back of the book. Table of contents is the part in the front. But as you're running into key terms and different things you look up, check especially the index. Secondarily, maybe the table of contents. But as you're learning the APA manual, get a sense of what's in the book and where things are, like having a sense that chapter 5 describes visuals, your tables and figures would be a good thing to know. But as you heard me mention earlier, the APA manual is an expert guide. It's for people who already are experts in their field who need to look up some core advice that has happened to work in publications in their field. but it's limited in its wording. It doesn't go into a lot of detail, you might have noticed. The blog that they run is a lot more friendly for students. Unlimited being digital, they can write more wording without being limited, cost-wise to how big the book would be. It's also more sort of practically applied. Many times the topic will touch on 2 or 3 different sections of the book because the book is so abstract, but the blog is more concrete. So I think for a lot of students, they would find the blog written in a more approachable way for learning APA materials. And there's actually a search engine box on the APA page. Let me show you that before we move to the next slide. So once you know the key term that you're looking for, let's say you have a long quotation. That's actually not the key term in APA. APA calls those block quotations, as you see in the results. Block, like blockhead. But since it's searching for the word long, it ends up producing these results. So a very useful site, and I find their explanations are much more readable than the APA blog, the APA manual itself. So I recommend using those in combination with each other. Okay, it's taking a while to load that example page. But definitely keep the link. Let me get my lights on in the room. Sorry, they're on a time delay. Keep that APA style blog link when you have questions arising that you can't find answers for clearly in the APA manual. It can be a very helpful resource. Okay, gonna come back over to share my screen. Oh, it's already shared. Back to full screen then. If I click the right thing, there we go. Okay, so as I mentioned, the references and citations are closely connected. As I begin the references, some of this stuff might sound pretty familiar, but I don't want to leave people out who have missed something or been misinformed along the way. So it's going to start with a basic overview. You're going to list every source that you've cited and no others. If you want to recommend other sources, you can name them in your sentence. You can even point to an appendix where you list other interesting sources. But in terms of your references page, that is a list of the sources that you cited in your text. So let's say your source cited somebody else. You're not putting the somebody else unless you have the somebody else as a source of its own. These are the sources that you cited in your text. They're, as you know, going to be alphabetized by the author, the first listed last name of those authors. And if there's no author, the title is what's in that first slot, and that's what we're going to use to alphabetize. We have an indentation that's like the opposite of paragraphs, where we do not indent the first line, but we do on the second and following lines. You'll see an example. There was one back here, and you'll see another example coming. We do not add any extra lines between the entries. You see how it's double spaced all the way? And we don't number or bullet point those reference entries. They start with the last name. Okay, so we're using this reference material as a review so we can focus on the APA citation styles, how they talk about their texts, which is what really drives the citation manual the most. This is a little bit hard to find, these generic 4-part reference entries, but you'll notice that all the APA reference entries are built in this style. Information about the person, then a period. Parentheses, the time, close parentheses, period. The title of the document, period. And where a person retrieves it, period. The first two, who and when, the author and the date, are our citation. The pieces that we use to build our citation. So I call this a skeleton. Usually you're going to want to use a good example of your reference type. Find a document that's similar in Chapter 7, because they can have some weird formatting on those entries. But if you're really stuck, you can build from this generic skeleton also. Again, since you're meeting with me 3 times during the semester, you should not have to build from a generic skeleton. You should be able to speak with me about some of those weirder sources and find out what examples we have for those. But I did want to show you those period separators. So you can see that those first two groups, the author date, separated by periods, are what we're working with. This example is a book called The Elements of Style, 4th edition by Strunk and White. The generic part is on top. You see the last name, comma, first initials, the year, etc. When we have a volume and an edition, they are shown at the end of the title like that. Okay, but our main focus will more often be articles. As you know, the journal publications are very common in research. So let's look at the more common articles. You see the same last name, and here on the date with your periodicals, you might sometimes see more information on the date than you do with books. If it's a monthly publication, then we have the year only. For example, Time magazine is weekly. Let me take that back. Let me say Sports Illustrated is a monthly magazine. So I would only list the year. If I was showing a publication from this year, it would be 2018. If a publication is weekly, like Time magazine that I mentioned, then we do show the month. You see that in 2010 December, but those are very uncommon examples. And if you're not sure, the year is the most common. Newspapers that go down to a daily publication get a very long date, as you see at the bottom. Most of the time, as mentioned, we're just going to have the year, because as you remember, this is forming a part of our footnote inside the text. So the shorter is usually easier to work with. But when you're in doubt, go ahead and look at a good example to see what you find out. One of those weird formatting things I mentioned in the references is that the title of your article is going to be capitalized like a sentence, not like a title. You see how the G and the H are lowercase letters here. The first letter of the first word is capitalized, and proper nouns would be capitalized, and capital letter abbreviations would be capitalized, just like we do in a sentence, but not like we usually do on a title. Okay, earlier I mentioned that journals have numbers that some of us don't know to look for, and this might be the first you've heard of it. If it's not, I hope it's a good review. The numbers that you see labeled here, issue and volume, come from the way these things are published. So let's take the Time magazine that I was mentioning before. When you pick up an issue of Time magazine at the newsstand, it's a softback, magazine style. And that issue, we'll use number 2 because we have issue number 2 on the screen here. That issue is only part of the year's publications. At the end of a year, all of the magazines, all the issues that came out in that year get bound in a hardback book. And that hardback book has a number of its own also. So that would, in this example, that would be volume number 1, Time magazine number 1. Issue number 2. And you'll notice the italics goes from the journal title all the way onto the journal number. This is harder for us to know in modern research because we have a lot of digital stuff. But remember that Time magazine. The way journals are published, you get the magazine first, the softback, and it falls apart. You could imagine if a research library has 100 students looking at a cellular biology magazine, over a year's time, it falls apart. Anyway, all those issues get published together in a hardback book. And so Time magazine volume 12 is a hardback book on a research shelf. So when you're looking to actually pull the article, you have to go get the book, Time magazine volume 12, off the shelf. And that's why the italics here goes all the way onto the volume number. The APA format is literally showing you the book, the volume number book. So let's see the next slide. Oh, yeah, there we go for an example. This one is from the Journal of Psychology and Theology, volume 29, issue 4. So to get that, I would have to locate a library that has back to the year 2001, volume 29. I would go to the shelf, pull volume 29 off the shelf, open to issue 4, and then open to page 361. Okay, so note we don't list titles like senior or junior or MD or PhD as part of the name. Okay, so you've probably seen most of all that stuff. Part of it might have been review, but oh, remember to give a web address when it is available, when you do have it. A DOI number is even better if you know what those are. If not, that's not our focus so much today. But since we're talking about references, do know that the APA wants you to supply those digital site locations if they're available. As I mentioned earlier, you want to never guess with your references. You want to really find a good example similar to your source and look at their formatting as you're building that reference entry, especially because of how we pull the citation from it. So this is kind of the punchline. This is what we've been building up to in doing some of that review. This is the part that is really sort of APA underlined and highlighted and exclamation part. This is really APA type of writing where they name the author in the sentence and cite things in this manner. So the author date, as we mentioned, uses the first two parts of the reference entry instead of a footnote. You'll have seen many examples before. Here are some reminders. These are quotes, so they have page numbers included. The last name is in red and the year is in blue. So as you know, if the last name goes into the sentence, the year goes along with it. And those two go side by side, the author and date. So you can see that author date format, where that name is coming from in these examples. So if it's at the end of the sentence, last name 2014, page 4, last name and 2014 are still linked. And if last name, if I name that author in the sentence, I need to take 2014 along with it so that the reference footnote is complete. So even though there's a page 4 at the end of that second example, the fact that I name the author inside the sentence means the year has to be right next to it for this format. The same is, I added this just to give you a gentle reminder. Many times when we're paraphrasing in class, we actually should give the page number. APA does not require page numbers for paraphrases, but if you think the reader might have a hard time locating what you've paraphrased, a page number is recommended. So that was actually developed for a different workshop, but I thought I should leave it just as a kind reminder because you might already be citing some of your sources. So here's a reminder of that. You don't need a page number on your paraphrases unless the reader would have a hard time locating it, then go ahead and include it. That can vary by your field and from professor to professor. So that's a good one to clarify when you're in doubt. So now that we're naming the author in the sentence, the APA has another thing that's connected to this. Anytime we're talking about the action that occurred, we want to show the time that the action occurred in the verb tense. And that's taken here from paragraph 3.18 in the APA manual on page 78. Tells us to select verb tense carefully. And specifically, they want us to use past tense to express any action or condition that occurred at a definite time in the past. And this line is the kicker, as when discussing another researcher's work or when reporting on your prior results. So Jones, 2003, argued. Smith, 2010, stated. Many times this is not our instinct. We're looking at a text directly and we use the present tense. Jones, 2013, argues, blah, 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 blah. Smith states, blah, 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 blah. The APA would not recommend that. They would recommend that you use the past tense verb to show that Jones argued that in the past, in 2013. So this is not too hard, but it's often something we haven't really thought about before. And it's a really crucial part of that, naming the authors in the sentences, using a past tense verb when we're showing their actions. Now, there's another add-on. Since they started to name in this format, getting rid of footnotes, and there's some naming of the authors in the sentences, we get some extra parentheses, what we might call too much parentheses or parentheses clutter. So if you want a really advanced rule, if you've already understood a lot of this stuff that's been in here so far, A really advanced stage of citing your sources inside the text is described in paragraph 6.11 of the APA manual. And in that case, we're going to leave off the year of publication when two things happen. So one, if you've already cited the article in that same paragraph, and you use the author's name in the sentence, that signal phrase thing that I've been mentioning. So if you name the author Jones in the sentence, and you've already cited Jones in the same paragraph, you're only going to say Jones, and you're not going to show the year again. It's actually implied from the prior citation. So this one, definitely one you might want to follow up on with the Writing Center if it's new to you, and if it's not new to you, great. But is certainly connected with the idea of naming our sources inside the text. We need to use past tense verbs to show those past actions of the writers. And then sometimes there's going to be a lot of parentheses, so we might choose to name the author in a signal phrase in a way that lets us have a few less parentheses hanging around. Personally, I think that the APA would agree that pronouns count, meaning I can say Jones 2017 wrote about blah, 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 blah. And then when I say Jones again, I don't need 2017 because I've named and cited Jones before. But I could also say he or she or they, because that is naming the author. The pronoun renames the noun, and it doesn't need the parentheses because of this rule. So in the Writing Center, we do always say, when in doubt, cite. Just so you know, if you're ever in doubt, go ahead and cite it. But if you're getting a lot of parentheses, this might be a rule to come back to and practice. It's a little bit advanced, but it is a useful style in the APA. And then another one that I left in, just in case you hadn't seen it before, page 102, oh, that's in the example. Sorry, that's not the APA page number. Indirect quotes are discussed in APA, and in those we don't show the year on the original source, that thing I've shown in green, because then it would look like a reference entry. So we want to avoid the reader thinking that that indirect text, the one that my author talks about, I don't want the reader to think that I have that text. I have the purple text, not the green one. So I'm going to name the green one without a year, just Johnson, not Johnson 2005. And then on my Smith 2003, the source that I have, I'm going to add the phrase as cited in. So now I'm pointing to Johnson. Johnson argued blah, 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 blah. And then I'm showing where I know that from, as cited in Smith 2003, page 102. That one is a little bit less crucial than the past tense verbs and the signal phrases, but a useful one to know about if you had not seen that requirement. As I mentioned earlier, there are 3 different sections to this presentation, and the APA part jumped all over. But being an advanced class, I knew that you wouldn't need some of the other background items. But let me jump back now to remove my share screen, see if there's any questions or redirects, comments, questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there any way you can share that Google Drive with us or the PowerPoint?
Yeah, it's currently shared so that anyone with the address should be able to get into view the slides, and I believe the professor has the address added. I didn't get to hear if that was added to Canvas.
Yes, I'm going to add it to Canvas. I just got the email from you, so I will put it in an announcement along with the recording of this video.
Yeah, and the recording you already shared, there were a couple on the workshops. That APA link would not be of interest to you students, by the way. It is the more beginning level stuff from which I extracted a lot, took out a lot of materials. The other links I definitely can give thumbs up to.
Has anyone seen if
Wanted
it's
to
downloaded in
explain.
Canvas?
What about the campus? I'm sorry.
Who was just talking that was a little garbled?
Yeah, please repeat.
Maybe not a question.
But it does remind me of something that people have had questions about. The page that you will have to link to and set up an account with to see our appointments calendar and set your appointments. The apu.mywconline.com. Let me come back and share my screen. Okay, this is once you've logged into that apu.mywconline. You see as times go by, they gray out. When they're available, they're white. You might have slightly different colors. These are from a staff perspective. But once you've gone into this screen, this is the thing most students miss for finding times to meet with me. There are different calendars. So you see you can actually look at 1 week's time. You can look at all sorts of different times, but they're contained within a specific calendar. In my case, you need the online and regional campuses. Otherwise, you'll have a hard time finding me. So when you're setting up those appointments, this would be the calendar you're looking for, online and regional. And if you notice, I'm in 2 different locations. That actually probably doesn't matter to any of you guys. But in terms of, you are looking for Dan R. when you're setting those appointments, given the nature of the classes setup with the course coach element. Okay.
Dan, do you
yeah.
think there's going to be any issue with the students finding slots when you're available?
That's a good question. I think I meant to add a note about that halfway through my statement and then failed. So thank you for asking. I do recommend students sign up at least a week ahead of time, especially given that they need to meet with me and not just with anyone. So that might mean that you're actually signing up for times based on your availability before you have gotten your markings back. I know that's not as easy to predict sometimes, but given how busy we can sometimes be, you see my times here today because of a class at this campus, and they all filled up just today, most of these. So I didn't know yesterday that this was going to be full. That gives you a good sense. You might want at least a week ahead in booking your time.
They could even go in now and pre-book those weeks, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
If you guys know what your availability is going to be, on those dates that were on that calendar.
This calendar advances through the end of the fall term, so you could hit next week, until you get to the dates you're looking for. There's a calendar navigation method also to get around. Once you have made your appointment, let me pull up the appointment for our discussion here today. You're going to enter all this information. It's going to have the times based on what you clicked on. It defaults to a half an hour, but you can change the beginning and ending time. You have up to 45 minutes available. It's going to set up your name and email address from the information you have on file, but then you'll have to tell us if you want to meet online or not, etc. And I'm showing all this to show when you do choose to meet online, it's going to add this little link, start or join online consultation. That creates a unique web address for the meeting space for your appointment. So you see that address up at the top, that's unique to this appointment. Yeah, but anyway, the main thing is to know that it generates that link. So you have to come back into your appointment form, load the appointment information, and then click on this link to get into your meeting room. We're very flexible if you want to meet on Google Documents, for example, because there's different formatting elements. It changes less of the formatting. We're totally fine with that, but we do need to meet here first, like standard or procedure. So we would come in here and you would give me the link to your document and I would paste it on the board so the office knows when they're doing their quality controls later what happened. Okay.
Dan, I have a question in regards
Yes.
to your availability. I did remember reading that you're available till 8 p.m. on certain days. Is that meaning that your last appointment is at 7:15, or you will take on a 8 p.m. appointment as well.
It ends at 8 p.m. So it depends on the length of the time. The last available would actually be 7:30, not 7:15. But yes, you have the right idea about the time. It ends, the available window ends at 8. So the last full 45-minute appointment would be 7:15.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And that is Pacific time for anybody who's not also in Pacific time.
I think I'm the only one that's not.
Can you guys hear me?
It's a little low, but I can hear you mostly.
Okay. My question was, if you're searching for an article through encore.apu.edu, do those articles come from EBSCOhost, Medline? Basically, do those articles stem from those main databases? So I'm just trying to see, is there a difference between searching for articles through those actual databases or just searching it through encore.apu.edu?
I don't know Encore itself very well, but I do know a parallel consideration. On the library page, some professors recommend just using a single database like EBSCOhost. I prefer more to identify your key terms. So I had used heart attack earlier.
Right.
Let's say myocardial infarction was a better term. That kind of zeroing in on your key terms and searching all the databases,
Yeah.
I find to be better, because you might find a very useful source from a complementary database.
Okay, thank you.
I do like the idea of using more databases, but you do have to narrow it down more sometimes because of that.
Right.
That's why some professors recommend, say, going into EBSCOhost alone.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. My information for contact is in the Canvas form that your professor showed. Thank you, Dr. Ollerson. If anybody needs to give me an email, it is droberts, DROBERTS at APU, as you see up there, if my screen is still sharing. Don't know if it is, but I will need to switch over now to an online appointment. So thank you all, and I hope to speak with you somewhat soon. Hope things are going well for you.
Anybody have any other questions? Well, what we can do is we can let Dan go, and then I can stay on the call. And if you have any questions about your the paper in general, I'm glad to stay on and just see if you have any more questions. So anything else for Dan? All right, well, thanks a million. I think, by the end of this course, we're all going to be just bowing down to you and your wisdom, and appreciate your guidance on some of these tricky things that come up, and
I know
trying to do the APA style.
I know people feel very grateful, and that bow down thing makes me smile, because ultimately the main thing we do is to help people realize how much they've learned and that they don't need to stress quite as much.
Right.
I know that we can help people see that, but that's often our gift, is not like being so smart, but helping students not sweat quite so much, not stress quite
not
as
the
much,
small stuff.
and see where they are and what steps to take.
Yeah, and very helpful for me as well to, how exactly to give feedback. And so, I think it's great for all of us to have you involved in this process. Thanks again.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Look forward to working with you individually in the near future.
Good night.
Good night.
I think you're still sharing your screen, but if you...
Yeah, on the way out now, though.
Okay. All right, guys. So I just want to take this time. I know, we're over our hour, but I do want to be available for you if you have any questions about the basic comprehensive. It has been called exam in the past. Now it's called directed study, because it's not really an exam. It's a paper. So, I think everybody likes to have an overarching glance at what this is going to look like. And so I think, in week 1, that's why I put some sample papers in there, and so put the rubrics in. And if you looked at that along with the syllabus, that hopefully gave you an overarching view. But I'm not sure if that did or not. So I'll just let you guys ask any questions.
I have a question in regards to the 2 faculty members that will read.
Mhm.
I know one of them will be you, of course, and the other faculty, do we choose, or will that be?
You know, if you have somebody that you worked with or somebody, you know, that you was interested in this topic area, you know, it has to be a full-time APU faculty member. But if you have somebody, you can reach out to them and ask them to be your second reader. Otherwise, what Dr. Cohn does, she is the kind of the administrator of all of COMPS. She asks us for a list of all our students, what their topic is, and sends them out to all the APU faculty, and then they sign up to be your second reader.
Okay. Do they have to be from the MSN staff, or can it be any APU faculty full-time?
I think it can be anybody. Because I know we have PhD faculty that read papers. Yeah, so I think it can be anybody.
I have a quick question to piggyback off of that.
Okay.
We have to submit the name of the person by a certain time frame if Professor Cohn is going to be just sending out that list.
Yes, that probably happens in maybe week 11, you know, probably where she'll ask for that. But, you know, if you want, I can let you know.
Okay, sounds great.
So you're thinking you might have somebody who you want to ask and you want to know when you should ask them by?
Yes.
Okay.
Right now, I currently work with Professor Lang.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought maybe I might ask her.
Sure.
Same thing. If you don't mind, I would like to ask Professor Saduki, because she does do a lot of foundations of nursing, and I think this would be very applicable with the pressure ulcer intervention I'm hoping on launching.
Yep. Well, you can go ahead and ask them already, or you can kind of wait till it's more closer to the end and you have a better idea.
Okay.
And then, you know, there's also the option for you to do a PowerPoint presentation at the end, or to do a poster presentation. So that's something we can talk about closer, you know, to the end.
Will it be organized like this, where it's an online virtual meeting when we present our items, or will we be doing kind of like a voice thread and they
if you do the PowerPoint presentation, what you would do is you would put little YouTube videos in each slide and go ahead and present it. And then so myself and your second reader would grade that separately than your paper. If you do the poster, then I won't be able to be there, but you know, what we might be able to do is to just have somebody with their, you know, their phone and record you giving me your presentation like you were at a professional organization presenting your poster to one of the judges. Or Dr. Cohn can just be the one who, and somebody else can go in and be the two who grade your presentation. So either way, Lisette has a lot of experience with doing presentations with YouTubes embedded in them. So she might be of some help.
Yeah, I'm available, guys, if you need it. I've become quite an expert. So I just wanted to clarify, because my internet is going in and out. I'm sorry. We said we can do what we've done in the past with the embedding of the videos onto our PowerPoint. Okay.
Correct. Yep, for your presentation. How about you, Naveen? Do you have any questions? I don't know if we're seeing a picture of you or if you're frozen. Okay, if that's it, I will end the meeting and then render this as a YouTube video and share with y'all. Okay. All right. Well, everybody, thanks for joining. And I'll talk to you in the discussions. I plan on having all day tomorrow just to work on the discussions and get back to you all about your ideas about your topic and paper selection. Okay?
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.